It gives me great pleasure to have the honour of delivering the last MPI in this 8th Assembly of the ACT Parliament. And what a suitable topic it is. Probably nothing typifies the legacy of the Stanhope, Gallagher, Barr Labor governments better than the cost of living pressures that they have foisted on our Canberra electorate. That is indeed a shameful and a lasting legacy, and one felt by every Canberran, whether they are homeowners, renters, single, married, with children or without, play sport, commute to work by car or bus, own a business or work as an employee. In every aspect of Canberra living, you see the interfering and costly hand of this government, whether it is in wanting to be the food police in school canteens, making canteens more costly to operate, whether it is in pushing up the cost of liquor licensing laws in lease variation charges that lift costs all the way through from builder to buyer to renter, for the car owner, for the small businessman who has to put up with a myriad of red tape charges and delays to get the approvals they need to go about their business. You only need to open the pages of today's Canberra Times and you see on page 6 the story headed, "Bottle Shop Owners Say Tax Hike Could Force Staff Cuts." The story talked about the pressures being faced by about 50 small business owners that would be hardest hit under the proposed changes to liquor licensing. The article quotes Australian Liquor Stores Association Chief Executive Terry Mott, who said that the ACT's licence laws were already the highest in the nation, and further increases would force bottle shop owners to cut staff and jack up liquor prices. Elsewhere in the same paper, there is a letter from a Campbell resident who writes that his rates have increased by 14.9% last year, when his superannuation income, which is indexed according to CPI, has increased by 1.3%. As the letter writer says, this brings to mind the words of Marcellus in Hamlet: "Something is rotten in the state of Denmark." There can be no better example among a rich field of examples of this government's wasteful ways of what they have done with rates. In the 2012 election, the Canberra Liberals warned Canberrans that their rates would triple. Mr Barr, as Treasurer, led a tirade of abuse, suggesting we were scaremongering and that there was no suggestion that this would happen. Tell that to the residents of Pialigo, who have seen their rates jump by a massive 174% in just 4 years. If we go through the suburbs in my electorate of Kurrajong, no one has been spared. Let me list how rates have increased in each of these suburbs in the last 4 years. Pialigo, 173.9%, Campbell, 77.5%, Red Hill, 74.4%, Yarralumna, 70.9%, Reed, 70.5%, Ainslie, 69%, Downer, 67.8%, Hackett, 65%, Forest, 64.5%, O'Connor, 64.3%, Deakin, 64%, Oaks Estate, 63.9%, Griffith, 57.5%, Turner, 55.6%, Narrabundah, 55.5%, Dixon, 55.4%, Watson, 50%, City, 40%, Lynham, 39.2%, Braddon, 38%, Barton, 37%, and Kingston, 30%. The average increases across my electorate is 63%. And next year, if the Labor Party is returned, suburbs like Kingston, Barton, Acton and Braddon, with a high percentage of apartments, will see their rates soar because apartment owners have been hit in the current budget. This will, of course, lead to higher rental costs and push up costs all the way throughout the ACT economy. But it is not only the suburbs in my electorates that have been savaged. This government has not played favourites. Every suburb has had rate rises at levels well above CPI. And why? And why are drivers' licences going up 5% and parking up by 5%, when the average increase in wages across the public and private sectors in the ACT is around the CPI? Those paying land tax had their base charges lifted by $100 in this year's budget, and next year will take an even bigger hit. According to the current budget, land tax revenue next financial year is expected to be $16.5 million. And over the next 4 years, the Labor government is planning to collect $55 million just in land taxes. One could argue that not everyone is in a position to be required to pay land tax, but a very, very large percentage of the community have a driver's licence. So why have licences gone up by 5%? Parking fees also by 5%, when CPI is around 1.3%, and wage rises are mostly tied to CPI. As the Canberra resident said, on the one hand, his rates went up by 14.9% this year, while his superannuation income rose by only CPI. There is something rotten in ACT, and it is this government who continue to milk Canberra residents dry. No one in Canberra is exempt from the savagery. Earlier this year, students were bemoaning the fact that living in Canberra was just too expensive. Canberra has a high percentage of tertiary students. We are the primary campus for two universities, ANU and UC, and we also have the Australian Catholic University, University of New South Wales at ADFA, and Charles Sturt University represented here in Canberra. We also have our own CIT. So when there are stories in the media about students in Canberra finding the cost of living here tough, that should be a concern. I know it is to those of us who are on this side of the chamber, because we know the importance of a strong tertiary education sector. But for too long, issues like this have fallen on the deaf ears of this ACT Labor government over the past 15 years. We need tertiary institutions to establish in Canberra. We need students to want to study here. But if it is too expensive for them to live and study here, they will go elsewhere, and another industry will be driven away. For the car owner, we have seen costs of registration rise, while many of us in this building have the advantage of free parking, but many of our staff do not, and they pay around $15.70 a day. That means over $160 a fortnight, just for the pleasure of getting to work. And no, the bus is not an option for many people, with commitments in and outside of work hours, such as footy training, shopping, collecting children from school or dance classes. The financial pressures on families living in the ACT are significant, and they are everywhere. For those who wish to play sport, the government hasn't left you off the list either. On almost a weekly basis, I have complaints from sporting groups, from junior clubs to senior levels, about how much it is costing their members to use Canberra ovals. It is always more expensive than across the border in Queanbeyan, and each year the fees go up and above CPI. For example, charges for AFL, rugby league and enclosed ovals have all gone up 6% this year. I well remember it was only a few years ago when the clubs were told their ground height charges were to rise in some cases by almost 50%. It was only that we found out about these charges and raised quite a fuss about it. There was a huge outcry in the media, and that it was only then that the government decided to back down a little bit. But just a couple of years later, we are seeing ground high fees at 3 times the CPI. And why are Canberra families having to pay 3 times above CPI? Well, a major reason, aside from the Labor and Greens parties' known economic incompetence across Australia, is the ACT's own folly, the light rail. Whatever figures you wish to believe and however you want to measure it, one line out of this year's budget should cause every Canberran to stop and think. Because while we keep being assured that this will not be an economic burden, it is all on someone else's credit card. The interest bill alone, according to this government's own budget papers, will be $38 million, starting in 2018-19, and $20.2 million the following year. The interest bill alone would be enough to build a hospital extension or the major part of a school. and we certainly need more of both of those. The Canberra Liberals understand the importance of containing costs of living. We know Canberra is a great place to live, to study and to raise a family, but it also has to be affordable for all Canberrans who want to live here. That is why Mr Hanson outlined in his budget reply speech that the Canberra Liberals want to create a better future for all Canberrans, not just for the select few. He said our priorities were to fix the health system, invest in education, to build our city and to grow our economy. He said we will leave no one behind. That is our underlying principle, and it is possible to do, because the two differences between a Barr and a Hanson government are rates and light rail. This year's budget shows that $266 million is collected in conveyances, money that Mr Barr plans to put onto household rates each and every year. The Canberra Liberals will not transfer $266 million a year onto Canberra families' rates. We will keep rates fair and affordable to every Canberra household. Canberra is a great place to live, to work and to study, but it has to be affordable. Under a Canberra Liberal government, it will be.
Matter of public importance, Mr Barr.
Thank you, Madam Assistant Speaker. Supporting the community